Hello and welcome to Dateline Hamden on WNHH-FM. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the stories and behind the headlines that make our community tick. State Senator Jorge Cabrera makes our community tick, and he's about to return to Hartford for a new session of the state legislature on February 9th, and he came into the studio to tell us what he's going to be up to. Welcome, Senator Cabrera. Great to see you.
Good to see you, Paul. Thanks for having me.
First bunch of times you came on, you weren't Senator Cabrera, but now you are Senator Cabrera, right?
That's right.
It's been a year, right?
Yeah.
How's it going?
It's been going great. It's been a Zoom session in the middle of COVID. So
I'm going to ask you a little closer to the mic, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So without touching. No, that's really good. Yeah, that was kind of weird. Here you are. You tried very hard to get state legislature. You ran twice, barely lost the first time, won the second time.
Yep.
And then you're up there and all of a sudden nobody's there. But everybody's there in the metaverse, right? We weren't calling it the metaverse yet.
Yeah.
What was that like? Was that what you expected beyond not expecting the technology and the physical presence of everybody? Was being a state senator in your first year what you expected it to be?
Yes and no. I mean, I had been in the Capitol many, many times before as an advocate for a variety of issues. So I was familiar with the building, familiar with the atmosphere. It was a little strange not to have the public there, but, our colleagues were there, our support staff was there. And the good news is, we utilized tools like Zoom, and we had record numbers of participation in our public hearings from the public, and that was fun. So
I've been thinking a lot about that because we did learn. It took a little while. People Zoom bombed at first and didn't know what to do. Then people loved they could be in their pajamas and not have to be up at the Capitol for 13 hours. They could eat dinner and read the paper and then wait for their turn. Was there a downside of not being in person?
The only possible downside for me is my personal time went away. I was working constantly, so I was able to be at home.
So it's more convenient, but you're never off the clock, which a lot of people are finding with work.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, I think we saw a record number of participation. We had people really participate at levels we haven't seen before, and it was convenient, and it should be. A lot of times up in the legislature, you go up there, you're waiting around for hours on end for 3 minutes of time to talk to a committee or to testify. This made it much more easier for folks. They could sign up, they could wait for their turn, and they could do it from the convenience of their own home.
What do you think that's going to mean going forward? So this year, because we still have what's at least an endemic, and for some people a pandemic still, you're going to do hybrids. So you folks will be there. You're going to go to work now at the Capitol.
Yep. We're having opening day. For those who choose to be there in person can go. My understanding is, for probably a month or so, we're going to be a hybrid system. And at some point, the leadership will decide, things.
But that means you're going to go to work every day? You'll do your hearings in person and just have the public on a screen?
No. To begin with, the hearings will be over Zoom. That may change as time goes on, but right now, that's the plan.
So what's going to be hybrid? What's going to be in person?
Meaning that there might be sometimes where we go up physically to go vote on certain bills.
Did you do that last year?
Yeah, we did it towards the end. There was an option for folks to vote remotely from their office or their car, but they had to be physically present on the property.
So how'd you feel about that?
It was fine. I went up and we took all precautions. We wore a mask, 6 feet distancing. We spaced out. We set up our offices, so to speak, with tables in the big old judiciary building. And we had plenty of room, so we did everything we could to stay safe, and we did.
So what about long-term, Senator Cabrera? Would you like to see hearings remain all remote, or would you like to see the senators there and some people come in person, some go remote, or just go back to the old days where you saw each other face-to-face?
I think if things continue to improve like they are now, the infection rate continues to go down, more people get vaccinated, we can put in place safe protocols in the Capitol building. I think it makes a lot of sense to have the building open. However, on the flip side, we did discover that the participation rate went way up because of Zoom. So I could see us doing some type of hybrid situation going forward.
And would that mean, so let's say, I don't think life will ever be exactly the way it was before,
right,
but when we get back to whatever the new normal is, would you ideally like to see people come testify in person? Would you like to see them continue to testify remotely? Would it make sense to divide it?
I think whatever brings the numbers up of participation, I think it makes perfect sense, especially with some of these hearings that go very late into the night.
Right. Some of that stuff's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, there have been many times where, parents have been with their children, their child is falling asleep because it's getting late. I think I think we should find a way to be able to have people have that option.
What about the option of also being in person, being able to pull Senator Cabrera off to the side, who you've worked with for, on 3 strike lines, and said, look, this isn't just about my testimony. Can you let me know what's going on? Because I represent 5,000 people,
Sure.
and I wanted to let you know something that I wouldn't be able to say at a public hearing. Those kind of conversations that kind of lubricate the legislative process. Would that Are we going to lose that?
I don't think so. I think we're taking an approach right now, what the leadership has expressed, to see how things are going. And I think as time goes on and things get better with COVID, I think it's reasonable to see the building open again.
All right. And we're talking to State Senator Jorge Cabrera, who's in the middle of his first term representing, let's see, I can't name all towns. I'm
I'll
sorry.
name them for you.
Hamden, Ansonia, Derby,
Bethany,
Woodbridge.
Yep. Bethany, Beacon Falls.
Beacon Falls. I always forget that one. They have nice hiking trails.
And they do. And a part of Naugatuck and Woodbridge.
By the time you're doing all that schlepping around campaign, do you ever feel like hiking in those hills in Beacon Falls?
Sometimes it gets late. It's beautiful.
So what are you looking forward to? This is going to be a short session. It starts February 9th instead of January, and it ends when? End of April?
May, actually. Yeah, May 4th.
But it's still shorter than it usually is.
It's about 12 weeks, yeah. It's a short session.
So what are your priorities? Less gets done, correct? Like you don't do a new
little
budget.
less gets done, but we have some big priorities. I think, one thing that I want to do, and I know leadership has signaled they're going to do this, is I think we really need to tackle mental health in our state.
Marty Looney was here talking about that.
Yeah.
And his point was that during the COVID pandemic, problems that were already there about how hard it is for people to get mental health help came to the surface. People saw a lot more of it, and the demand was even greater. So that might give you some momentum to fix it.
Yeah, we have to. I mean, I've spoken to so many teachers in my district and young people who are struggling. The levels of depression and anxiety are sky high. More kids are going to the guidance counselor's office looking for help. We don't have the resources that we need to put into the mental health infrastructure, and we've got to do a better job of servicing those folks. And I think COVID laid bare the gaps that already existed, but we have an opportunity to really change the structure and really address these issues.
Could we be specific about that? So what don't we have enough resources? Do we not enough therapists for people? Do we not get enough reimbursed by insurance companies? A lot of therapists don't take insurance because all the hoops you go through and the low reimbursements or what they consider low reimbursements. Yeah. So what is the problem specifically that we need to fix?
So for starters, the professionals I am talking to say, number one, there's not enough social workers in Connecticut. We need to do a better job of making it easier for people to go to school, whether it's dealing with their loans, scholarships, getting a pipeline going of people who are going to go and become social workers. I think also reimbursements are important. A lot of times the providers have told me that the insurance companies take way too long to reimburse them for services.
So you're talking about length of time, or are you also talking about amount? Because I always hear about amount.
Both. A length of time and amount. I think also, one of the things I want to explore, one therapist told me, she's a private provider, that, the people who get their provisional licenses and need supervision, they can't hire them for services because they have to have a certain amount of hours of supervision. It's about 3,500 hours.
I'm sorry, what are they called?
Provisional licenses. So when you come out and become a social worker, there's a period of time where you have to have a provisional license, and a lot of the private providers can't bill if you're for provisional because insurance companies won't recognize it.
And they say because we're not going to pay for something that isn't the same proven quality.
Well, yeah.
Or they just look for any excuse.
You're starting your career out. You're new. You need to be supervised. You need to learn the ropes, right? You need to gain some experience in the field. One thing I'm going to be talking about and exploring is that whether we've reached a level of crisis where we need to seriously take a look at that to get more people in the zone, so to speak, get more folks out there to help.
How do we do that? Do we say insurance companies, you have to approve reimbursements for people with provisional licenses?
My understanding, there's a licensing board that is involved in this. So this is something I'm going to be exploring.
Or maybe fewer hours, or then they worry the person might not be good enough. You mess with someone's mental health.
Well, no, you need someone to supervise. I think it's a medical director. A lot of hospitals, agencies who have bigger budgets are able to afford directors, and a lot of these smaller providers who are don't have large payrolls, large budgets, can't afford to have someone supervise.
So the way you go about it is through the licensing board or through regulations on insurance companies? How would it work?
Well, what I'm exploring now, and I have more work to do on this, is I'm going to be exploring whether there's something we could do, even if it's temporarily, with the licensing boards to allow those with provisional licenses to be able, if it's for a period of time, to get rid of the backlog. Because a lot of the people I'm talking to that are providing therapy services, their wait lists are enormous. So we know that there's people that want mental health services and simply can't access them. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm looking to.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand it. So the workaround would be that you need fewer hours, or do you allow someone provisional licenses?
The workaround would be if you're in school, you have your master's degree in social work, and you're starting to do your clinical work. That maybe for a period of time, because we have such a backlog, we allow private providers to be reimbursed if they are able to get more social workers with provisional licenses out in the field.
What would there be a downside? Quality control?
quality control. Some folks I've spoken to said they're concerned that you're green, you're coming onto the field new. There's concerns about mistakes and hurting people, which is a legitimate issue. But it's something I think we should explore, because what I'm hearing is there's a lot of people who are seeking mental health services and just can't get them. And one of the problems is there's just simply not enough practitioners in the field in Connecticut.
All right. And so one thing can I throw in my 2 cents and my bias as a journalist?
Sure.
So obviously I salute every effort you and Senator Looney, everyone's making about how to make it easier for people with private insurance to get mental health services. Yeah. If the insurance company industry's business model is to get as much money as they can from people and then work as hard as they can not to give them services to which they're entitled, right? That's how they make a profit, right? They deny you or make you go through hoops or not pay enough to them. Can we ever fundamentally address this problem if we have private insurance industry rather than public?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I understand that you have to make laws today. You can't do it 20 years from now when Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are elected president. So what can you do about that question? Can you pursue a public option? But that's off the table with the governor too, right?
We did. I'm on the insurance committee, and we had a public option bill. Unfortunately, that didn't get out. I know Senator Matt Lesser, a friend and a colleague, has been a champion for this. I don't know what's going to happen this session. It is a short session. My sense is it won't. But we need to tackle this. It's really, really important.
Is that something you support long term?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've the way we do healthcare in this country is really, it's just not working. And I think if this pandemic has taught us anything, is that we need to do a much better job in getting more people high quality insurance at an affordable price. And what that means, we have to change the way we do business in Connecticut. And a public option, I think gets us closer to that.
All right. But listen to Dateline Hamden with State Senator Jorge Cabrera. What are some other top priorities you have? Mental health is a big one, I could tell.
Yep.
What else this session?
Well, there's a couple of other things that are really important to me. I'm on the Veterans Committee, so we've got some fixes we got to do to make sure that our vets are getting the help that they need.
What are those specific fixes?
Well, again, it's kind of tied to mental health, because a lot of the veterans, already struggling with mental health issues. We want to make sure that they get the help that they need. We've been working with the commissioner of vets on this to start the process of figuring out what we can do.
Well, there they have Veterans Administration Hospital,
yep,
which I would argue, despite its problems, might be a model for how you can do good health care. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're not wrong. No.
So what do you need to fix? It was really interesting what you told me a minute ago about, for everybody else, how you have to maybe increase the supply of practitioners and maybe relook at how the provisional licenses are dealt with. What do we have to look at with veterans to help them get better care?
Well,
are there long wait lists? Do they have staffing problems?
Sure. They have staff. It's funding. And a lot of these problems are money problems. We need to make sure that they have the money that they need to get the proper staffing ratios and their facilities. A lot of these facilities are older and need upgrading. So we're looking at that as well.
And how does the upgrading of facilities, obviously that's important.
Yeah.
But how does that tie into access to health care?
Well, a lot of these folks, there's some facilities where they stay there. And so you need to be able to have good facilities for them to be able to live and to thrive.
It's interesting because people like you and me, we're not involved in the military. I'm guessing you're not a big war guy. I'm not either. But there are all these people now who become soldiers who are doing remote war. Have you read about that?
Yeah, I have. I saw a documentary on that, actually.
You're stateside.
Yeah, the
drones. And you go to work and you're doing these drones in another part of the world. And you're killing lots of people. And you're killing a lot of innocent people. And it is impossible not to make a mistake that you're blowing up some parents and kids at the Red Cross Center instead of what you thought were terrorists.
Yeah.
And that's causing big mental health. Have you seen any of that in Connecticut?
I haven't specifically, but it makes perfect sense. And you're right. It is. It's causing a lot of mental health issues. It's almost like a video game. I saw a documentary on it.
It is. That's what they're saying, yeah.
And you're so far removed from the reality of it.
And yet it's having big...
Sure.
And then you go home to the barbecue. Everyone talks about the barbecue. Yeah. Like you've gone doing the video game, you killed real people, and then you go into the barbecue in your neighborhood. Yeah.
I know. It's a big deal. That's a strange thing, but it's
we're into strange times.
Yeah, that's true.
So mental health in general, veterans and mental health, any other big priorities for this session?
One thing that I want to try to tackle again is tax fairness. I'm on the finance committee, and in the last session we had a bill, and unfortunately didn't make it out, and I think we need to seriously
What was the bill?
It was a bill championed by our Senator co-chair John Fair and Sean Scanlon, and it provided basically more tax fairness. So it would raise the top marginal income tax rate on earners earning $1 million or more a year. For couples,
single earners?
Yep. So, no, couples $1,500,000 single earners, they had an increase in the capital gains tax.
So right now, capital gains is taxed at less than regular income, right? So that means wealthy people pay less.
Oh, yeah.
And then you also, for that other thing, you're talking about marginal tax rates. You're not saying that everybody would pay a high rate if they're rich, but once you make the $500,000 as a single, or you make the $1 million as a couple, you go from 6.9%, is it, to 7.5%?
Roughly, yeah. I don't have the numbers on top of my head.
And we have a Democratic governor who said absolutely not. He comes from inherited wealth in Greenwich, and he says that punishes success because people who have obscene amounts of money should not pay the same rates of taxation as people who work at hospitals or drive buses. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for the governor. But
well, you've been in the conversations.
I have.
He said that punishes success if you were to... Because, I mean, the big thing... So you got to study last session. Last session, you did not have enough votes to increase tax rates on the wealthiest. And now the governor's running for re-election. He does not want to be tagged as someone who raises taxes. And he's not going to do it anyway on his class allies. But... what did happen last session is you at least studied the issue. So the last time we looked at how much people pay in taxes was 2014.
I know.
We did a study, and we found out that the people, the top 1%, pay 1/3 as much in their tax rate of what they actually pay in state and federal taxes compared to working class people. 1/3 of what people who like teach, drive a bus, work at a construction site, they pay 3 times the tax rate of someone really rich. And that because we don't have updated numbers, which we're all guessing are going to get much worse because income inequality has increased since 2014 and sophisticated lobbying has taken place to get tax loopholes.
Yeah.
You're going to get a number this year, right?
Yeah. Well, we're going to ask for it.
Well, I thought the study's taken place.
The what study? Well, yeah, but I haven't seen it.
Department of Revenue Services doing the study.
Yep.
The governor appointed Mark Boughton, a Republican governor Republican mayor who ran for governor to eliminate the income tax. Is hard at Department of Revenue Services, but a good guy, right, to deal with, right? What do you think he's going to give you that number?
I'm going to ask for it. I mean, we're waiting for that. I haven't seen that report yet.
What happens when you get the number?
Well, it's going to help us to be able to make good policy and finance. I mean, that's going to be the big thing. The biggest concern I have this year, and going into the out years, is that we got a record amount of money from the federal government to balance the budget, and we have, thank God, we have surpluses and we have people moving into the Connecticut. But I'm really concerned about the out years. What happens in 23 and 24 and 25 when all this money runs through the system, so to speak, and we still have the same kind of structure in place, and we may be faced with a similar situation of having to figure out where to cut. Right, those years that we had, where basically we were fighting for austerity budgets. That's the real concern that I have. I mean, there's a real fiscal cliff coming. And we have a lot of people with lots of needs. We talked about mental health, but there's also funding for schools. There's all kinds of other things that we need as a state. And what happens when that money runs through our system? And we have to be able to tackle the tax code and make it fairer to make sure that working class families and middle class families can keep a larger percentage of their income.
So what's the solution? What are you going to work on this year?
Part of the solution is, as we spoke, you have to ask those top earners, again, these are people who are at the $1 million threshold and above, to pay their fair share.
Is that any chance that can happen this year? Like, what are you going to try to do in this short session when a governor is running for re-election, your own party, and there's no way he's going to raise taxes?
I'm going to try. I know there's others that are going to try as well. We've got to continue to have this conversation. You know, the reality is, if we've learned anything, and I pray that we have from COVID, is the immense gaps that exist in the state, whether it's access to mental health, whether it's our public schools, whether it's our roads and bridges. Thank God we've got this money coming in from the feds, the infrastructure bill, and other things. But if we don't change the underlying structures, the way we collect taxes, the way we dole out funds to the various towns and cities, we're potentially going to be in a similar situation before COVID, and that is we're going to be constantly have this tug of war about where to cut and who to harm. And we have to solve that problem. That's the core problem in Connecticut. It's a structural issue in Connecticut.
So this year, you're going to again advance a bill to raise marginal tax rates on the wealthy?
I am working with colleagues right now on the possibility of raising a bill. Obviously, I got to work with my colleagues and chairs and other parties, but there's a group of us and advocates and others who've been talking about what we can do.
And it takes years.
It
took a lot of years to get
sure.
To get death penalty done. We got it. The earned income tax has been raised. So what ways Democrats who want to deliver for working class constituency, try to get around when they can't have taxes raised on the wealthy, is to increase the earned income tax credit for the poor and working class. So that doesn't give you more money to run government, though.
No, but it helps the poor.
It helps them, right.
Yeah, and the governor, to his credit, did move on this. I think it should be higher. It should be around 41, 42% earned income tax credit. I think you need to put more money in people's pockets. That's really important. I know there's also talk of a property tax credit because the budget is doing so well. That's something that I would
and
probably
a sales
favor
tax reduction temporary. What do you think about that?
I think so. I mean, I have to look at the numbers and see how that's going to affect everyone. I mean, the bottom line for me is still the same. You know, what are we doing structurally, right? We have these years where, unfortunately, COVID hit and it exposed a lot of things. But if we don't do things differently going forward and change the underlying structures in Connecticut and the way we collect taxes, the way we spend in different communities, especially poor communities and middle-class communities who need resources, who need good schools, who need good roads and bridges, who need access to mental health, whose after-school programs, all the things we know that nourish and enrich kids and help them develop. If we don't do that, the reality is that in the coming years, once this money runs through, we're going to be sitting in a very similar situation than we were before COVID and have to make really difficult decisions about who to hurt and what to cut. And that's not a place I want to be. I don't think that's a place anyone wants to be. I think we need to take full advantage of what has been exposed because of COVID, learn from it and say we can do better in Connecticut. How can we change going forward to make this state more equitable, to give people more access, more on-ramps to the middle class? And that's what I'm really focused on.
All right, George Cabrera, State Senator. Got a few minutes left. Just want to hit a few more questions by you. Are you running for re-election this year?
I am, yes.
And the man who you beat is not running against you. He's running for Congress now.
That's correct, yeah.
So but the district, how do you think it's going to play out? Like in 28, the last mid-year, presidential mid-year election was great for the Democrats, right? 2018 and 2020, because people were voting against Donald Trump in Connecticut. Is that still the dynamic, or how is it going to play out this year? Is there going to be Joe Biden is unpopular. Democrats are unpopular right now. For the first time, I think, in our living memory, perhaps, Republicans are outpolling Democrats nationally in the question of who do you want in Congress, party-wise. Yeah. You have the Valley, which is a very pro-Trump area, even when they're Democratic voters.
Yeah, sometimes.
So not everywhere, you're right.
Yeah.
And Hamden, which is so bright blue, it can blind you. So what is that going to mean for you on the trail?
I think Connecticut is a bit of a different boat. I think the national trends you're seeing, I think some of that may spill over into Connecticut, but we're a pretty blue state.
We've gotten to be quite blue in the last generation, including Hamden getting bluer.
And I think even in the Valley, I love the Valley in Derby and Asonia. A lot of those working class, middle class families. I think COVID has really opened people's eyes to what more needs to be done. And that state government can do that. They can fill that void. The reality is when you have these large once-in-a-century crises like we had with COVID, government is really the only entity in society that can step in and do what needs to be done to keep us all safe. I think we're learning that more and more. So I think we're in a different situation. I think people realize the role of government is important in their lives, whether it's schools or mental health, a lot of the things that we lean on every day to live our lives. So I'm just going to do my job. I think I've done a good job. I have a record now. I've things I voted for that I think have helped my constituents. And you get back out there, you tell your story, and then at the end of the day, it's up to the voters.
And you pick up Secretary of State. Everyone and their parents are running for Secretary of State this year. Do you have any early favorites?
I don't. I've got a lot of friends in that race. And
you do.
I'm going to reserve judgment.
You kind of wait to see who catches on, right?
Well, who's
going to get the support?
Yeah, well, it's more than that for me too. I think with voting is a really important issue. We saw what happened last year, where our democracy being threatened and is at stake. So the role of Secretary of State in Connecticut is even more important now.
What do you think of ranked choice voting? That's the one issue I see people disagreeing on in the Democratic side list.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know yet about how I feel about that.
And the labor movement, your background is in labor movement. Do you still have a day job at United Food and Commercial
I
Workers?
do. Yeah.
Are you organizing? You had some quite big victories in recent years. That it was Stop and Shop workers, which I would argue reflects a growing support for labor in certain kinds of industries that, you already had a union Stop and Shop, but you look at the Starbucks people having their first votes. But overall, unionization is still down. We're down to 10% of the workforce, and most of it's in the public sector. And yet there is, you talk about COVID has changed everything, there is this in pockets like where you work and where baristas work and kind of gig workers work, Uber and stuff. There is militancy. What does this mean, Jorge? What's going to mean for Connecticut?
You're right. Yeah, the polling on approval of unions is really at an all-time high, but we're still not seeing those gains materialize on the ground.
Except it's specific, like Starbucks
Yeah, there's
vote here.
pockets, there's pockets.
Amazon, you
Yeah.
got an NLRB,
But
National Labor Board, that's open.
This is why structural change is so critical. We talked about this earlier. It's the same thing in the labor movement. You have these laws in place from the Labor Relations Board that really favor employers over workers. And so you can have all the sentiment you want. You can have all the organizing you want.
But you do have, when you have a Democratic president, you have more successful elections like you're seeing now with Starbucks. And because you do have people picked there who aren't anti-union. Like you had Scalia's son before, right? Wasn't he on the NLRB before?
I think so. Yeah, but you also have a lot of bad law, case law that you have to waddle through, in these new cases. But I'm glad you brought that up because you reminded me. One of the big things we're going to be pushing, and my friend and colleague, Senator Julie Kushner, and I have been working this, and Robin Porter as well, is we want to have pandemic pay for frontline workers. That's something that we're working on hard. Grocery workers, teachers, all those folks who didn't have the luxury of going on Zoom that had to go out and take risk, and some of them got COVID. Some of their family members died from COVID.
So is that going forward or is that retroactive?
I don't know how it's going to pan out yet, but we think that we need to do something, and some type of pandemic pay for these frontline workers. Things are being discussed now. We're trying to work out what categories to include and so on. But I think.
But are you looking for retroactive or?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's what I mean. Yeah, I'm sorry. Retroactive to. We'll have to decide at what point in time. But the bottom line is that a lot of folks still had to go to work and take risks, and they took risks to keep our economy going. Mm-hmm. To put food on the shelves, to keep our schools going. They went out there and worked every day. They couldn't stay home. They simply couldn't do it. And I think Connecticut needs to do something to reward them and acknowledge them for their sacrifice.
State Senator Jorge Cabrera, sounds like you're going to be busy. You got a 12-week session.
Yeah.
Sounds like your head's going to be going a million places for those 12 weeks. And you're going to be talking to a lot of people and trying to get some legislation passed.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
Well, thank you for coming on Dateline Hamden to let us know what you're going to be up to.
Appreciate it.
And I might get that cane and rope you back in after the session to let us know how it went.
I'd love to do it.
All right. Well, it's always a great pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, Paul.
Thanks and we're going to take a little break and then talk about Ukraine with one of our local community's closest Ukraine watchers about what to think about next and why we should care and what's really happening behind the headlines. But first, we're going to have the Afro-Semitic Experience, based in Hamden, New Haven.
Nice.
Playing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.